Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin, strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person fog of war capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show. I think I'm going to make Jimmy play a Goblin Warlock just to get even. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm Byron O'Neill, your host for today's Comics Creator Chat. I'm always excited about getting to talk comics with their creators and the projects they've got going on, but today I'm ecstatic. Not only do I get returning guest Pornsak Pichetshote on the show with me, who's one of the nicest people in the medium, but it's a double treat to get to introduce Terry Dodson on the show for the first time as well. They have an amazing project dropping soon called The Horizon Experiment, the Manchurian with Image Comics. This will be the opening salvo of a series of 5 one-shot projects designed as something akin to a TV pilot. Each features original protagonists from marginalized backgrounds set in a popular genre and inspired by pop culture icons. Pornsak is co-editing the series with industry veteran Will Dennis, and the plan is to host all of them on the show if calendars and lives cooperate over the next 5 months before they're released, to give you a rounded flavor profile of all the cool eccentricity the Horizon Experiment has to offer. So, Pornsak and Terry, thanks for coming on today. You both doing well? Everybody doing well?
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Doing good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Glad to have you on. Well, Pornsak, at least you have decent lighting this time. You're hiding under a lamp, although that might be topically appropriate to introduce a spy book, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, no. God, that's right. I forgot the last time we talked. It was just like I had like one lamp that could like illuminate. I was in a hotel room, I think, that had one lamp that could illuminate the whole thing. Yeah. But yeah, no. Now I'm decently lit. I have a light source or two. One should say. But thanks for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Well, I want to delve a bit into what the Horizon Experiment is all about and where it came from. As I just mentioned in the intro, we have 5 one-shot projects in 5 months, starting with the Manchurian, which is a Chinese James Bond take. Then we have The Sacred Dam, a Muslim John Constantine story. Boondogs follows a family of werewolves with East African descent. And as someone with lupus, this is especially interesting to me because, hey, it's right there in the Latin name. Then Motherfucking Monsters, an Evil Dead for Black Nerds, and finally Finders Keepers, a reverse Indiana Jones tale. Now that the uninitiated at least have an inkling of what to expect, Pornsak, what was the germ of this concept, big picture?
Well, a couple years ago, I did a book called The Good Asian, and it did well for me. It won some awards, won an Eisner, won a Harvey. It sold well, and it got a lot of noise online. And the thing that I would hear over and over again was that, and for anyone who doesn't know, The Good Asian was about a Chinese American detective set in 1930s, and it was a film noir and a noir. And people would hear a lot like, "Oh, I wish there was more stuff like this, more stuff that was like sort of taking these classic genres and taking it from a new perspective." And I remember when I heard that, I was like, I kind of wish there was more stuff like that too. The problem is I can only write so much from my perspective, but I realized, with my background with editing, with the people that I've met along the way, I knew a bunch of people who could do that kind of stuff and do really great work with that. And so that's kind of was the start for the Horizon Experiment. And from there, I just reached out to them and sort of told them what I was thinking, these like one-shot pilots. And and these were all people who really wanted to do more comics, and they were coming in, some film, TV, novelists. Vita's the one who was in comics already, but wanted to do more creator-owned stuff. And now they've all started making their road to comics. But at the time, they had a little trouble breaking in. And even I would say now, I don't think as great as their stuff has been, I don't think they've done stuff that really showcases what amazing creators they are. And that's partly because they haven't had the luxury of doing creator-owned comics. And when you're doing a creator-owned comic, it just gets to be 100% of you. It takes everything that you sort of put into it. And I wanted to see them have those opportunities. And while there's a lot of places out there that would give them that opportunity, a lot of them ask for like half ownership on stuff and all that. And most of these people had gotten to the point in their lives where they didn't need, they didn't want to give that stuff up anymore. So this was a way to just bring all that sort of stuff together to make 5 books that I just really wished existed. And the idea was, I think all that, they were all this idea of the rising tide that lifts all ships to sort of help bring attention to it and sort of see, it's a weird time in the market right now. If the market can sort of, has room for all sort of 5 of these books, all books of which I really love.
Well, I was reading somewhere while educating myself a little more in preparation for our chat about how are you looking for an artist. And speaking with co-editor Will Dennis, you said, what we really need is a Terry Dodson type. And Will responding, well, have we thought about asking Terry? And I interviewed Will a while back, and although I don't know him well or anything, that sounds like a very Will Dennis thing to say.
Yes.
So Terry, how did you connect on this, and what appealed to you when Pornsak reached out about it?
Well, we'd met. I met Pornsak at the Eisner ceremonies 2 years ago. We were sitting at the same table, the image table. He was the winners part of it, as the losers part of it. But so we evened out in the end. So we met there, and we kept in contact. Not or after that, and then he mentioned the idea to me. Both the story he mentioned immediately, and that which I liked the story idea. Then he mentioned the experiment itself, which I loved. I mean, someone who's been working in creator-owned books now, surprisingly, for almost 20 years, I realize how important it is to get the word out. Getting the word out on your project is as important as the project with creator-owned, because there really is no giant corporation funding you. You've got to do it yourself. And so I love the idea of that. As someone who's, seriously been working hard on creator-owned, and with Adventure Man, I've been just Matt and I promoting that book, and I can just see how difficult it is to get people to notice and to order, even if it doesn't matter the quality of the project. If people don't see it, they're not going to buy it, right? It has to be. So this concept of having us all work together, getting 10 voices promoting a book as opposed to just 2 voices. And then I just feel like that amplifies every voice you get amplifies, right? So because every person has X number of followers and all that stuff. So I personally love that idea. So so the story was amazing, but the way we are going to work together to make the books sell together, I loved. I mean, that just so appeals to me as knowing the comic side, the business of the comics. So yeah.
Well, after kind of focusing on the business, I guess, after reading through the Manchurian, it feels appropriate that this ultimately landed with Image, because honestly, it reminds me of that foundational moment in April of 1992 to some extent. And that's not a sales prognostication. I can't do that, but it's reminiscent, at least in a sense of spirit, trying to do something different. So the market, as you mentioned, is incredibly challenging right now. So as creators willing to try something that contrasts with current sales models, what frustrates you both most about the current direct market ecosystem? Or, was this even born of frustration, I guess?
I don't know if it was born of frustration per se. I mean, sure, there was some frustration behind it, I suppose. Just because I think everyone in comics is talking about like, oh, we're not at our like pandemic heights and numbers anymore. People aren't locked in and with a ton of money they can spend, and they're only spending on comics. But I don't know. So that conversation has sort of just been in the industry. But so I don't know if it's much as frustration as just more as just like I just wanted to see more books like this,
Okay.
And the thing that I want to see more books like this. But I think going back to what you were saying before, it is at the root of comics, and I am, anyone who's followed my work, anyone who knows me, I just love the history of comics, and I love the history of sort of genre. So to me, this goes back to just like DC Showcase, DC First Issue Special, Top Cow's pilot season, the Warner's Apparat series. I love comics were built on these one-offs like Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy 15, Showcase number 4, all these things that would just take off and become their sort of their bigger things. And so if there was any, I don't even know if it was frustration as much as it was nostalgia for, there was a time in comics where it was just all experiments. it was just all throwing stuff against the wall to sort of see what sticks. Sometimes you
Yeah.
get an Eclipso, sometimes you get Jason's Quest, but it was all this. And then it just got to the point where I feel like a lot of that experimentation went away because everyone's trying to build these business plans around these things and sort of all that sort of stuff. And so I just love the idea of let's just put stuff out there and just let the audience tell us. And one of the things that I found that I've had lot of luck with in my career is just betting on the readership at the end of the day. Like a lot of my
Yeah.
books, if you were to pitch them to editors and all that sort of stuff, they'll be like, I don't know about this. Can we change this? Can we change that? And just having faith that the readership is there to pick it up and let them tell you if they want to do it has always sort of borne well for me. And to your point, that is the great thing about Image. I mean, Image was built off of 7 people, and this I have so much respect for this, at the height of their careers. Like, they were selling at their most when they walked over. And I think since then, there's a lot of people who've tried to do stuff like this, but I don't think the Image creators have gotten the respect that they've gotten, that everyone else has watched their popularity wane and then tried something new. They tried something new at the very height where they were selling millions of copies of comics, and they decided to try something new. And as a result, generations of fans and creators have benefited from that. But so to me, like, there was no better place for this as Image, because that was the spirit of Image in the first place, of taking this enormous risk on themselves to make to make a version of the industry that was going to treat them better.
Yeah, it feels like very much a test case to answer the question: are we misjudging the comics reading audience? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and possibly not just with respect to formatting, but demographics as well.
Yeah.
Big picture with respect to representation, these are all focused on protagonists of color. So I'm curious if you feel like the character, as in the books, representational needle feels different in the big 2 versus indie books at the moment.
Well, I think the thing about, Marvel and DC have the best resources to sort of bring in new talent, to train new talent, to set them up to a position to succeed. The problem is the business model of Marvel and DC is they're working on pre-established characters, and they're mostly characters that were created in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s. And you're always going to start with this back foot of just like, here's this kind of lame B-list character and try to sort of make it cool. So you never get to start off, at ground zero and just try to take something that has something to say about today, that is current, that is modern, that is the best of sort of what that experience potentially is, just by light of the fact that it was created like 40, 50 years ago. So I think just starting people at a level ground of just sort of saying like, hey, let's just do something that's just like made for today's audience, that isn't something that people have a in their back of their heads or memory as a C-list character, as a D-list character. Just something as simple as that, I think, levels the playing field a lot. And I also think too, like, one of the things I found with my books is that, you can, I'd always thought my books were targeted to a very specific audience. And I've been very pleasantly surprised to find that, oh no, the audience is much bigger than I think it is. And I think I'm making the same mistake that perhaps other editors sort of make, that, when you do a book with a black protagonist, it's a black book and all that. But I think the you know, the audience is much bigger for it than that, like, especially when you look at like horror audiences or espionage or action, the audiences are much bigger than that, and especially in comics, they're very passionate about the stuff. So that's a lot of where that particular piece of calculus came
Okay. I mean, is it as simple as saying sales numbers are the metric for success?
from. Yeah, I mean, I think they have to be at the end of the day, right? I mean, for each of these books, it's very much about the individuals, because the way books for Image, the books are either self-financed or partially financed by Image. And so it really comes down to what the creators are comfortable with, since they are taking the bet on themselves. And that every Image book, it's one of the great things about Image, honestly, is that creators take bets on themselves. But because of that, every creator is going to have a different comfort level in terms of what they're willing to do to sort of take that bet on themselves. And so sales, these first one-shot sales, are the most important aspects of it. Pre-ordering is so important for this particular thing. It's always important for comics, but for this particular thing, if you want more, you really, it needs to show up in those sort of pre-ordered numbers, because that's what's going to make those creators being like, okay, if my first issue does this, knowing that sales drop off after that, even if you relaunch, but if my first issue start off like this, I know going forward, like, oh, this is I can, with this amount of sales, I think I can be comfortable doing more.
Okay. Well, let's get people hype about the book. Getting into the meat of the book itself, this is great stuff. I'm a huge fan of both of your work, and this didn't disappoint. And honestly, that's because I came in expecting something that would go bombastic and throw
Mhm.
everything at the wall, right? Big action, chases, spy shit. You have 28 pages here to pull a reader in, and that bombastic nature just really wasn't how it played out to me. And that would have been safe. And although I'm certain you both could have executed that well, instead, there's a bit of an understated tone that creates this beautiful pocket to kind of explore the lives of the characters that inhabit your world on an emotional level. I came in expecting a spy thriller, which I got, but the lens of it was entirely flipped on its head, which makes it stand out in the genre that it's playing in. So, building that
Yeah.
world, you Pornsak, you clearly have an interest in Chinese spycraft, and I had no idea that it looked so different than kind of our own, or like CIA, British MI6 or similar. So why did you want to explore that specifically?
I just found it so fascinating. I found it so fascinating. For anyone who doesn't know, Chinese espionage, they use the analogy of 1,000 grains of sand. And the idea is that if if a Western spy wanted to get sand from a beach, they would send like an elite frogman in the middle of the night to go to that beach and sort of steal it. But what the Chinese would do is they would send 1,000 tourists to that same beach in the middle of the day in broad daylight. And at the end, all those tourists would sort of get together and shake the sand out of their boots, and they'd have as much sand, if not more, than that elite frogman, the elite spy did. And I just thought that was such a fascinating approach. So completely the opposite, and it's a very Eastern approach where it's about the community and about as opposed to sort of the individual.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it felt like a great way to tell a different sort of type of spy stories that hopefully still feels like adjacent to the spy stories you're used to seeing, but just sort of like a different sort of take on it. Where it was more just about the little individuals that sort of make up the process, as opposed to the big sort of bombasticness. Which, by the way, is something like when me and Terry talked about it, we always kind of saw this as our sort of like Casino Royale, where we can kind of build to sort of more craziness sort of from there. But to start at a place that was really about character and really about establishing the character and the concept in this world that you're living in, and I got to do it, and I got to do it with Terry, so it looks gorgeous. And the thing that excites me about it too is like this is the editor side of my brain, is that you know Terry was like the perfect person for doing this. It's like this kind of action, this intrigue, but it was also sexy, and it's kind of everything that Terry does. But at the same time, he hadn't done anything exactly like this before. So when you're working as an editor, that's your ideal moment where you realize like, oh wow, the person has all the skills for something like this, but at the same time they actually haven't done it. So you get to be the person to like break that story in a certain sense.
Well, Terry, as the visual world builder in the partnership, is it more challenging for you as an artist to do creator owned work where you're doing all the heavy lifting to fill in over working on established characters?
Well, I mean, if you have to put workload in, it's definitely more workload. But as far as enjoyment, I enjoy it way more. As someone who's worked on everything for all the mainstream companies once or even twice, I love the challenge of creating. That's what keeps me excited about working in comics, is the fact that I get to continually create things. I mean, that's the doing something repetitive, like if I was an animation and I keep drawing the same Bugs Bunny every day or something, I one day I'd be done. The greatest thing about comics is that every day, every page, every panel is a new thing, and especially, and that's really true. That's true in mainstream work, but in creator owned, it's especially true because there's nothing designed, nothing's been figured out before. It's all comes out of my head and or our heads, and it I absolutely love it. I love the challenge. I love creating. That's my favorite thing to do. I can't think of a job in the world that I'd be happier doing than like a creator own book, because it's so much what I enjoy doing. I love designing characters, designing worlds, designing clothes, and then I love drawing comics. I love telling a story on a page, and so it's a world that I get to design and just live in for weeks, months, years. I just it is way more work. I could make a lot more money short term just drawing books at Marvel and DC. But as far as creative pleasure and just feeling satisfaction for what I do, it's the creator owned stuff. This book in particular, I mean, so this is technically my fourth creator owned book I've done now this century. And each one of them has been a complete 180 turn from the one before. The very first thing I did was like a steampunk Victoria era story set in Europe. The second one was a Russian spy sent to the U.S., a Soviet spy sent to the U.S. in the 70s at L.A. Third one was Adventure Man, which is this pulp New York reboot set today, and now here I am dealing with a Chinese super spy in the U.S. So I love the challenge of creating new things, and I like I have, for better or worse, I just have so many interests in so many things. I love to play around in so many different genres, and I've been fortunate in my career to really have done every like kind of mainstream superhero kind of thing. And so now there's this whole other world of all these other genres that and creating new worlds and places and stuff. It's just such a blast. And this book was great where it ended up being a very quiet book. And so how do I separate this from anything else on the shelves? And I just kind of figured out those ways where I needed to pop things, make it exciting, and then I color my own work, and so I figured out these unique palettes I was going to use for this book to really separate it from other work that I'd done before, and then and then it's so huge for the storytelling stuff, and how when we change scenes, how this all works, and no, it's been a blast. So and Pornsak has given me a ton of great material to work on, and he's been an awesome collaborator to work with as far as anytime I have any question about the stupidest, slightest thing, I'm able to get that figured out right away.
Go ahead.
One thing I just wanted to say too is just like, and I feel like you can totally see how much Terry loves sort of create her own work specifically because it's something I feel very lucky about is like he colors his own work on his create her own sort of stuff. And I think if you're a Terry Dodson fan, like if you haven't seen his create her own work, you haven't seen Terry at his best. Like the colors are just so gorgeous. It's as great as all his Marvel and DC stuff is, and you see it more in his covers. I sort of feel like because he colors his own covers when he works for Marvel and DC, but I feel like you see so much of his like interior work colored when he works on his own stuff, whether it's this or Adventure Man, or Red One and all that stuff. And I just think just Terry doing as many of those aspects as he can, it's the best version of him.
All right, let's take a quick break. Hey comics fam, indie comic book publisher Band of Bars just got a level up and announced it is now a cooperative. This heralds a new era for them, including a partnership with Dauntless Stories. And they added several new members to the ownership group. Marcus Jimenez is now Chief Operating Officer, Brent Fisher takes on the role of Chief Diversity Officer, and Joey Galvez is introduced as Head of Kickstarter Ops and Social Media Manager, which is sure to increase their capabilities overall as a publisher. And it further promotes their mission statement of advancing representation, inclusion, and diversity in the medium. They also established a new board of directors to help chart the new path of their journey. With new projects in the works like Alas Goodbye dropping in June, Unbroken soon launching on Kickstarter, and Pawn coming up with Dauntless, stay tuned to this space for more exciting news from the growing Bards family. Let's get back to the show.
There's all these little bitty things. With the color choices, it's tonally muted. It almost feels like it was colored normally, and then either a soft dusky blue overlay was thrown on top, or everything was designed using analogous colors close together on the color wheel, which makes the whole thing purposefully understated, except for Calvin's own kind of inner monologue, which is a deep red. So it's an interesting choice for a spy-focused book, and yet another example. While I'll remember it. So talk to me about some of those color choices.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll say the other thing. Everything you said was exactly how I approached it. And then when the big moments happened is when I will really open it up. We had a couple of little parts in this where we did that, but it's all just like kind of strategic planning, keeping the colors relevant to what's happening in the story.
Okay.
Not trying to overcolor things that do not need the attention drawn to them. And really trying to let the coloring be the storyteller, the mood setter, which is, I really love that. I always think of my work in full color, even when I'm penciling it. I always imagine that everything I'm doing is fully realized, and so it's such a thrill to be able to have that final pass on the work with the color. And it's amazing how much you can tweak a story with the colors. It's I think as the years go by, people are going to start realizing how important it is. Maybe that the person who's drawing the book should be coloring the book as well. Obviously, there's just people who don't have don't have that color sense or whatever. But I really think that it's essentially like being the director, I guess, because you've got to pull all these things together. And how can someone feel that mood correctly if they aren't the one that actually created it? I guess. And there are amazing colors too, but it's that singular vision on the visuals, I think, is for me anyways, it's ultra important. I can't imagine trying to describe all this stuff to someone else to try to portray. And sometimes, it's color. You put the color down on a page and all of a sudden you realize, well, there's this one panel that looks not right, and I can go through like 12 colors on something at once to figure out what works best. I pretty much know what I want, but it's always a fun surprise to have this one color just pop out of the blue and go, that's the one that's going to make this one work.
Yeah, I mean, from the jump, you get sucked in with the color work. First off, the cover actually echoes the Chinese flag. So, and you have in the panels there are lots of like facial profile shots that create emotion with the acting, which creates a more grounded intimacy with the characters than one might expect. Kind of in a spy genre project where usually it's all full objects, James Bond gadgetry, that sort of thing. So it was a refreshing change of pace for me. And how was it for you to kind of work in that pocket with no Harley Quinn hammers, no super intricate topographical, background detail work, and just focus on characters?
I mean, I will say almost from the very beginning of my career, the one strength my art had was that I could I drew emotions well, drew characters
Okay.
well, drew talking scenes well. I mean, from the very like once I started working in the industry, I never had to look for a job since day one. I've been hired there's always been a job sitting in front of me at all times. That's because I think, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I think writers realized that I could tell talking stories. I could draw. I mean, people call it talking heads, and I don't think of those pages like that, but I understand what they're saying. And I don't sit there and think, oh, I got to put heads on this page and make it interesting. I just tell a story. It's all the same to me, whether it's people talking, whether it's action, it's a mix, it's intrigue, horror, whatever it is. I approach the way I tell stories the same for all that stuff. They're all equal. Doesn't matter how much action or whatever. It's all the same. It's all about telling the story, and I enjoy the challenge of trying to get the emotions right. I want everybody to be able to read the story without any of the dialogue on there. I want it to succeed just visually. I want people just to look through the book and know exactly what happened. Obviously, there's all the good details and that's in the dialogue, but it needs to flow visually and be understood purely visually. And it's something that's fairly natural for me to do. But yeah, it's a challenge too because you get down to like these millimeter differences of expression. It's like so it's always this thing of pushing myself to make sure it reads without the dialogue crystal clear. And it's I'm not always happy, I'll admit, but that's daily on everything I do. There's no difference between this project and anything else where there are frustrations. But at the end of the day, it's professional work and it gets this point across that's good enough, or then sometimes it really succeeds well. I'm thrilled when that happens.
Yeah, there was one particular panel that jumped out to me kind of as a visual artist myself. And I'm very curious about that. So it's in the museum and you have all these angles. I would have erased this scene, I guess, 10 times, trying to gotten way too obsessive and how all these angles move the eye around, but you have two people standing back to back with these paper airplane like sculptural installations. That was bloody brilliant. Like I had not seen that before. And I really so as somebody who is a visual artist, I'm always looking for ways to engage somebody and keep them. And I work in photography, so you get one image to really suck people in and try to, make them stick with whatever you're trying to tell them. And
Right.
and this was really bloody brilliant to do that. So it was actually a fantastic moment for me
Oh, cool.
in that first
Yeah.
issue.
Well, that was I thought I had designed the pages or I'd done the breakdowns on the pages for the storytelling, and I realized that this is this art museum. It's like, do I really want to create 50 new paintings on these walls? It's like
Yeah.
so that was the first thing. So I knew I didn't want to do that, and so I go, well, it's modern art, so we can do sculptures, and that really gives me the freedom to make a lot more depth and interest on a page, and that's really what it comes down to. You have these. It was that, or is it gonna be flat paintings on walls? And it's like that has no depth of interest, and we have the freedom here to to do that. And then I really felt that those shapes were really totally directed your eye in. Obviously,
Yeah.
it was depth, storytelling, and then what they're talking about in those shapes are, these sharp, angular things, really, really echoing what's really going on in this quiet museum. The importance of what they're saying. So, I mean, that's why I do what I do, because um, having to push that idea through like 10 groups of people before they allow me to do it would I would just give up. But with comics, it's immediate. Once I have this idea and I know it's going to work, or I think it's going to work, I can just push it and push it. And the more I can push things, the more confidence I get with it, the better it turns out. And that is the beauty of doing comics, and it's the beauty of, especially the beauty of the creator owned, where you go with your best idea and your gut feeling. If you're wrong, you're wrong, but generally your gut's going to be all right at worst.
And the
When
thing
you're
about
working,
Terry too, I would have to say, is that like it's funny, like Terry does a bunch of scenes where people are talking, but he never does a talking head scene. There is so much movement when
yep.
Terry, when Harry has a scene about a conversation. It never feels like two heads sort of talking. It's never that. It always just feels like you're constantly moving around backwards, forwards, in and out. Like there's an enormous sort of sense of movement, which is one of the things I think going back to like why, writers like love working with Terry. It's just like, yeah, you can give him a scene where two people are talking, but it's never a talking head scene. It's things are always moving.
Right. Yeah, and that's just storytelling and visual interest. I mean, most movies are talking head films. You really think
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
or TV shows, and you don't get bored. And why is that? Well, the faces are so pretty in real life or
Yeah.
whatever, and so you can't depend on that in a flat medium like we have to use. So you have to use visual interest, and something that's really, I think, smart to do. And I think this is good for all artists out there to know, is that set up a believable environment and put those characters in that environment and pull back and show that environment. And all of a sudden, you do that once or twice, and you don't have to do it again. All the readers are now imagining that environment in their head, and that allows you the chance to be a lot more creative with your pages. You're not trying to cheat stuff, and you're not just doing. And then again, you're avoiding just the talking head thing, because people just do the talking heads. They go, "Oh, it's a talking head page. I can do 4 of these in a day. It'll be really easy." And all of a sudden, you've lost those people. You've lost those readers. Whereas you work a little bit harder, and you set this stuff up to look interesting and let the readers do all the work for you on page 4. So by the time you get to page 4, you don't have to draw a lot because you've already done all that work.
Is that what takes the longest amount of time to put that environment together? Because I'm imagining when you're working on a longer form project, and not, let's say, like a cover. You know, I was just curious if there was like a page number where you get your feet under you with a look and you're happy with it. Does that differ from project to project? Is the environment itself the nucleus of what you try to do when you're taking something on that's new, and then you can just roll?
Yeah, no, that's world building. That's huge. I mean, the first issue of anything I do takes forever. Even if it's a Marvel DC book, 'cause I'm still, even though that world's built, I'm still building my version of it. It takes a lot longer as a creator owned book. Every first issue I've done as a creator owned has taken it. Basically, any first issue I do of a creator owned book, I will never make money on, because the amount of time it takes me to build that world as I'm drawing it is there's just it's just that page rate would be thousands and thousands of dollars. So I always know that the first issue is a loss. But if the first issue has to have all that thought put into it in order for issue 2 to be done, 3, 4. By the time you get to the second, third, fourth issues, you've done so much of that world building, so when the next time you come to something new, you already kind of know how to solve that problem, how that works in that world. So it just speeds everything up. And
Okay.
then, yeah, like I can, like Adventure Man, we're on our 12th issue now, so I can say, and we're doing all these brand new designs for that new part of the series right now. But I know that there's the system that these things fall into that I can fall back on. It's like, this is a totally different looking thing than before, but we do these kind of things. And so I kind of echo those kind of things in the newer ones, and that just speeds it up. The Manchurian would be the exact same thing. The next time I do the Manchurian, I'd be able to do it, I'd say, twice as fast, mostly because it's the real world. It's real world set locations. And so it would this book would go much faster, much more like a Marvel style book, I think, eventually.
Okay. Okay. Well, getting into some of the character stuff, I love the fixer angle for the Manchurians in the book, as I have spent some time as basically a fixer myself.
Mm.
And I have no experience as a spy, before anyone asks. And no, I've never worked for the mafia. Yeah, I'm way too honest for that. But I did play that role way too often, babysitting rock stars. So yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, quick story. So I was working as production manager for a huge diva whose name will remain secret, as I still have friends in the business and I don't want to damage their rep. I don't know if either of you have heard of diptych candles. Are you familiar with these?
Uh, No.
Okay. So these are super high-end bougie candles made from high-end French botanicals, right? So said diva heard about Madonna having these backstage, and then they had to have them. These candles are about $75 a piece, mind you, for like an 8-ounce candle,
Wow.
right? Yeah, they had to be added to the advance rider, which is essentially a fulfillment list that's passed along to each venue prior to the arrival so they can get things ready. So you just can't find these anywhere. And it was becoming a massive, massive headache dealing with local arena managers bitching about trying to find these things. So my idea was to buy beeswax pellets and some essential oils and basically make fake ones. So we printed out fancy replica labels and problem solved. I just placed them in the dressing rooms and
That's
and
great.
lit them for a 10-month tour with the said diva not being any the wiser. I wish I could say that was an isolated example, but rock stars are really rare breed. And that was pretty much daily for well over a decade. So
Wow.
damn it, I qualify as a fixer. But anyway, Manchurian's dealing with sensitive and or esoteric problems. So why make that the focal point of the story?
I just love, again, I think it is part of my love for sort of the history of storytelling. It's like I love that he kind of had a procedural engine. He had this he had a client of the week, a case of the week, and I kind of thought that was, and maybe that harkens back to the pilot nature of it all. I'm not sure, but because the world of Chinese espionage is no one portent is more than anyone else. I like this idea of someone who kind of goes into all their lives and sort of and sort of helps sort of all those people, and I do love that character of of the fixer, like with Harvey Keitel's character in Pulp Fiction and all that kind of stuff, where their
Yeah.
job is just like whatever problem that you have, like sort of I'm gonna take care of it. So I like this idea of, oh, he's a fixer for spies. If you're a spy and you have a problem, you know the way Chinese espionage works is that you need to not, the whole point is that you never commit a crime, that you never break the law, because the
Mhm.
second you break the law you become a liability. But if you never break a law, then there's no way to catch you, there's no way to prosecute or anything like that. But sometimes things might have to happen where people do need to break the law, and you just have this one person whose job it is, who's been trained specifically to break the law, to sort of help other spies. And it really felt sort of, it fit that world, but also I thought it was a great inversion of that classic, you know, I think we're all of the age where we remember those, those 80s television shows that were just like, oh, you hire someone, or just like the PI. I
Yeah.
miss that like the PI who kind of is brought in to like do things that people just sort of hire. So that felt like a very modern take on that. And yeah, and it felt like it could lead to sort of all these interesting stories. And I think at the end of the day, what the Manchurian is about is, every comic sets itself in a world, and the Manchurian very much is about the world of disillusionment. It's about how different people get disillusioned and what they will do because of their disillusionment. And to me, there is a lot of stories to tell in a world where you're looking at all the different ways people get disillusioned, and how one person can kind of help them. And the twist and the irony being here is like he's not helping them for America's sort of a best interest. He's helping them for their rivals' best interest.
Okay. And you talked about community, and I'm curious about sort of the root of Chinese espionage, versus everything else we've come to associate with it. Is community is that ultimately the root in this more corporate versus state oriented sort of espionage?
I think so. I think I never really thought about it until you just sort of sent it right there. But I do think because Chinese espionage is corporate espionage, and corporate, especially the world way we what corporations and what corporate sort of warfare has become, it has this like winner sort of take all mentality. So it is very individualistic. And so it is natural then that its opposition would be sort of a community. And so there is a kind of like class warfare that's sort of happening kind of at the center of the book between corporations and people. And I honestly think that's what the book is about at the end of the day. It's just like how these are all, if you're talking about disillusionment, it's disillusionment from sort of like this corporate structure that has taken over every aspect of our world. And how do people sort of fight back against that?
Okay. Well, what are you both most proud of in terms of uniqueness of the delivery on the Manchurian?
I mean, I'm most proud of working with Terry. Like, I just think the book is so cool. It looks so good. And also too, like, it's also Terry Terry has this art that just comes from being a veteran comics artist, I think, where he can make a 4-panel page look like a splash page, because he knows, like, that opening page where we do our Ursula Andress / Daniel Craig sort of homage of him coming out of the water. That feels like a splash page, even though there are 4 panels on that page. And I, and it was when I sort of started writing comics, it was something I would always have in my mind. But it took an artist like Terry to actually pull it off and make you realize, like, oh, there's a reason why not it. When Terry does it, it seems like anyone can do it. But then you realize, working with other people, like, no, it takes a very a very whatchamacallit, it takes a lot of experience to be able to have that command of a page, to be able to get that much information on there and yet still make it look like everything breathes.
It does. I agree with you. It takes a lot of experience to do that. Because I could do even that page. I struggled with that happened, but those are I just on a pure technical level. Doing pages like that are extremely important, and they're not easy because it's 4 things, and how do you balance these things? And but that's comics. That you're juggling so many things when you're doing comic books, and that's the reason I like the challenge of it. When it works, great. When it almost works or it's good enough, that's good too. I love that. It's such a high wire act, and I'm glad that that particular thing worked out, because it's the first image that people will see. It's really key. I think I had that script maybe, I don't know, at least 3 months before I drew that page. That page was in my head for a long time, and I knew how key that page was. And then based off of that, like, success of that one, I know, like, how to handle that next time that shows up in that issue and all those things. I really go, okay, this worked well here. It's a thing that in comics, I find it builds upon itself page by page as you do it. But as far as, like, the project itself and the satisfaction, I'd have to say actually that it's kind of like this one issue thing, as it is. This experiment is done. We've done it. It's readable. It's up to the market now to decide what we do next with it. But it feels really good to be on this side of it, where it's always been this idea, but now we have this one issue thing with people to throw it out to the public, let them see what they think about it. We did the best we could, and it's fun to be doing that, as opposed to launching the book where we're 12 months out or whatever. We're sitting there promoting it, but we don't really even know where it's done yet. We're here. It's a wrap. It feels very good. It's rare that I'm on something that's not being done years ahead of me after the time. So I love that idea of it.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say too, when it talks about Pride, is I do like the fact that we give a whole world and a whole sort of mythology and and future antagonists. Like, I do feel like that's kind of lost in comics now, and it is something when I read old comics I look at, and it's just like, oh, that's so cool. They just give you everything in a single issue. And now we stretch that to 4. Yeah, 8 pages sometimes.
8 pages, all there, man.
Yeah, and so the idea, and it's like this for all the one shots, but just because this is the one I worked on, so I have a more intimate connection with it, is the fact that you get a full meal, that you get not just you get a new character, which hopefully that you enjoy, you get action, you get gorgeous art, you get like a world and a sort of mythology, and then you also have hopefully tracks for like where that story can go too, and it's all done in one comic, and I love that, and I have a lot of pride with that, and it also makes me think, like, I wish we saw more stuff like that. Like, I just really love that.
Yeah, comics is that thing where it's. There's no limitation on what you can do with comics. That's why this is such a great idea. That there. You should be able to walk in the comic shop and pick up any random thing and be excited about it. It's just, I love that the only limitation on comics is like your imagination, the creator's imagination. So that's just such a rare art form that we have nowadays.
Yeah. Well, one of the obvious, issues with the experiment overall is, what the hell do you do if it jumps off, right? Everybody is busy. If it is indeed a market banger, now that we have to work on this, with all these already packed schedules, it's a bit easier on writers because they probably at least have an outline for the first full arc ready to go. But artist Terry, are you ready for more carpal tunnel? Like, what's the plan here? Let's say this is successful and the sales numbers are great.
Well, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
All I have on my schedule, saying a lot, but all I have on my schedule to do comic book wise is create our own work. So it's just a matter of scheduling things in, and my own schedule, my own. So it's just a matter of figuring out where that's going to fit. I have it vaguely in mind, so that's, I'm juggling all these things I'm juggling. But again, it's a good problem to have. It's like, oh, this is a book that people want to see and it'll be successful. And so if I do it, it's because the market demanded it. So that's a nice way to go into a creator owned book, because generally you're going, as we did when it
Yeah.
started, we go into it blind, not knowing what people are going to think. So if we know going into it that it's going to sell already, there'll be time made to work on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like scheduling is always sort of a problem with sort of any creator own book. But I think the important thing that we wanted with Horizon, the Horizon experiment was just that, like, again, like I think you could get paralyzed by sort of trying to plan out 5 years into advance, or 2 years into advance, or a year into advance of like what the thing is. And again, it goes to the spirit of like just what built comics, and all literally everything that we read now in comics was built on this notion of we're just going to do this one story, and then things sort of took off from there. And I think it's getting back to that, and to getting back to that sense of experimentation, that experimental play. I mean, I think comics should be constantly throwing ideas against the wall. And like sort of Terry says, if it's a good problem to have if people want more. And certainly, like I'm thinking sort of with that in mind, and as well all the creators are. But I think the most important thing was not to paralyze ourselves with theoreticals, and just
Right.
wait for the enthusiasm that's in there, and then once it's there, capitalize it and make the most of it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
with the
I'll just
Horizon,
say quickly.
Go ahead.
I was going to say quickly that, I mean, when I took the job is on that fact. I'm just going to jump into this because I know it's only this much at this point, and if it's successful, great. It was pretty
Yeah.
much a blind jump, but knowing it was going to be a fun thing. It was going to be a great project to work on and a great time for me to do, regardless. So, with Pornsak's great writing, the material, and the limited scope it would take of my investment of time, it was an easy thing to commit to.
Well, in terms of a shared universe for the overall Horizon experiment, what can we expect? Are they going to interact at all if we go forward? Is that something you can even talk about?
I think I can talk about like the fact that we very much, I think, all the Horizon creators kind of talked about like that model of Image Comics,
Okay.
where at Image, it's up to them if they wanted to cross over, but they could, very easily enough. And so some books, it was issue 2, and you got someone from another book. Some books it was issue sort of 25, but it was all sort of. There's nothing in the books that cancels out. It makes it impossible. It's just sort of logistics. And so if it's fun for any of the creators, like I think it's all something like, oh yeah, at some point. But I will also say too, like that's almost like a third wave problem. I want it like the first,
Yeah.
the patient on the
Yeah.
table right now is, can we see more of these in general? And then once we get that, then it's like, oh, some of these start to overlap? But that's thinking very far in advance. And right now, the main thing is just getting people to show up and say, hey, do you want more of this? Like prove that you want more of this in general, and then we will give you more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, what else are you both working on? Terry, I know you've been doing a lot of cover work recently. I'm a Zatanna fan, and that cover for Bringing Down the House, that's just gorgeous. And I'm chatting with Jason on Thursday about Dazzler, which I know you're doing some
Ooh.
cover, maybe /
Yeah.
covers work for as well.
Yes.
So what you got?
Yes.
What you working on?
Well, yeah, cover wise, let's see. I just the Gotham City Sirens, I think, assignment is just wrapping up this week. Next week, the new Zatanna cover, the Dazzler covers will launch for 4 issues in September. I'm always doing like variant covers, and then next year DC's got me lined up for, I think, maybe possibly 3 different cover assignments,
Nice.
for very similar kind of stuff that people would love to see me do. But day to day, I am drawing the next arc of Adventure Man. Volume 3 just shipped in July. Matt and I are working on Volume 4. Matt's written all 3 scripts for Volume 4, which he has never been ahead of me on scripts before. So I think that gives you the level of excitement that we both have for this next arc. I feel like in the 3rd volume we really hit our pace for the type of stories we want to do, and Volume 4 opens the door to be where we thought we would be, I think, in Volume 2. So I think the fans are really going to enjoy it. Matt and I have never been happier about working on it, and And by being 3 issues, it allows me time throughout the year to work on things like the Manchurian and covers and other stuff. So I love the amount of time per year I'm working on it. That makes me be able to put all my best effort into it and yet have time to do other things. That keeps me excited. Yeah, and actually, I'm actually, between the cover work and that, that is keeping me busy for the next year. So, yeah.
All right.
And
Pornsak, what about you? You're clearly wrangling a lot. What else are you up to?
I'm wrangling a lot. I think so. The way it works is I can rarely talk about what my next project is when I'm promoting one because they're so far out. I think it
Yeah.
is public though at this point that I'm doing something in the DC Absolute universe, and then a sniper like spot comes on me if I start to breathe any more than that.
Okay. I won't press.
yeah.
Well, I'm super excited to see all the amazing drops and I really applaud the big swing, right? And creative approaches in the medium. I wish there was more space to let people take more chances these days. Remind me when we can expect the Manchurian to hit shelves.
Yeah, so the Manchurian can hit shelves September 25th, but the most important date I would say is September 2nd. That's where you need to tell your stores that you want one because that's where FOC final order cutoff happens. And that initial, print run and all that will really tell the tale if there's going to be more or not. So September 2nd is the most important day. So tell your stores that you want a copy or 2 or 3.
All right. Well, hopefully we've convinced people that they need to order it because I love this book. Although we've given you a taste of what's in store within, it will still catch you off guard with like the clever way that these two have bent the genre, and it plays so well off of honestly the current paranoia too, which we didn't touch on, of everything we're dealing with in America. So make sure to call your local shop and let them know you want it because those advance orders are everything, especially here. Terry and Pornsak, thanks for coming on the show today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. Well, this is Byron O'Neill, and on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The great visionary leader of India, Mahatma Gandhi, said, "It is health that is real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver." Listen to the Healthy Grocer radio show on your favorite podcast platform. We know that health is our greatest wealth, and we will be discussing all aspects of natural healing. Explore everything from supplements, superfoods, and healthy lifestyle choices to help conquer stress and boost productivity. Top industry experts and natural health professionals join us for a deep dive into our healing journey. You can find the Healthy Grocer radio show on demand every day wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And remember, health is your greatest wealth.